So how do you process a result like that?
Yeah, well, we knew going into the game that clearances and contests were going to be critical for us. Obviously, it was going to be really hard without Big X, our ruckman, but we still backed ourselves in that if we could be okay in contests and clearance, we'd be in the game, knowing full well that they've got one of the most formidable and dangerous forward lines in the competition. All week we're looking up the matchups and trying to work out who'd suit who down there, but our best methodology really was to try to limit the supply by winning contests and winning clearances. And once they beat us in that area of the game, their polish and how clean they were with the ball really hurt us. And we're working on some things with our game in terms of giving exposure to some of our young players. I mean, I think Jeremy Cameron probably had more games on his own than the collective group of North Melbourne defenders that were made up our back seven. So we're giving exposure. The dam wall had already broken, but it's just like we take Charlie Comben up forward to cover for Nick Larkey. Knowing full well he's been pretty good for us down back, Big Tom, but we just hung in there for as long as we possibly could. But then he goes back in the last quarter. He's actually pretty good in the last quarter. But we want to back in these young players for us and give us some exposure, hoping that we might be able to be strong in the contest in the middle of the ground. And they just showed us a clean pair of heels. We weren't dreadful in that space. We still got our hands on the footy, but the pressure that they were able to apply to us, I think the disposals the difference is only about 10 or 15 disposals between the two sides in the end. Obviously, the difference is the quality with which they used their ball compared to what we did ours. Some of that was due to good pressure from Geelong, and some of it we just had some blatant turnovers that we need to be better.
There's been a couple of games in the last month or so, understandably against good sides, but what do you think sort of stopping you from moving past outcomes like tonight, one against Hawthorn a few weeks ago?
Well, it's a tough year to get through. You got sides like Geelong that are, got everything to play for in terms of setting their season up. And you only need to look at the Bombers last night and us tonight. It's just like some battles with some injuries, some suspensions, and not have the depth on our list that what the other sides have got. So there's a whole combination of factors. But the bottom line is, just like we saw, we put young O'Sullivan into the midfield in the last quarter. Did some really good things for us, and young Bant showed some things. He's only played his first full game tonight. He came on as a sub last week, but we'll continue to give exposure to our players, and what we don't want to get caught up in is the hysteria around results. We know where we are as a footy club, and right at the minute our depth is being tested, particularly in our back end, where a lot of our guys of our more senior guys are out injured, which means that the middle of the ground is super critical. Like we said, there's not a side in the competition, even when they've got all their players up and going, that aren't a little bit jumpy with approaching the Geelong forward line. They're a very, very talented group of players, experienced. And they've got a really, really good balance of guys that are dangerous deep, close to goal, and others that are high half forward, nearly like midfielders, that give them really good supply. So we're aware of that. That's why I've said 2 or 3 times in this press conference the contest in the middle of the ground was just so critical for us, and they were too good in that space.
Jeremy Cameron's able to get out the back a few times and get some pretty easy goals. Do you think he could have done a bit more to limit him, or is just put it down to...
Well, I think... it was nearly laughable how far forward he was, just waiting for the ball to come back to him. And that's what I'm talking about, the quality of possessions. But I think most of Jez's goals that he scored were off a turnover from us. And you can afford to roll the dice a little bit like that when they were moving the ball so well. But most of those came from a turnover from us. Because they don't, from stoppage, a player's never sitting out the back that far, and particularly on his own. But it'll quite often happen when you've got the ball and you're you're squeezing up behind the ball, trying to support your players in front of the ball, just in case of turnover. And if it's a blatant one, which there was a few of them tonight, then someone forward of the ball is going to get the benefit of that. And Jez got into a few too many that we'd like.
Mention those turnovers, method, personnel, execution, experience.
Oh, a combination of a lot. I remember years and years ago, in my first year at Hawthorn, really disappointed that we got crunched in the game against Port Adelaide, and then as we were walking around the boundary, kicking the dirt, disappointed that we'd lost by such a big margin after, trying hard. But then Todd Viney said to me, just add up the games total, add up the experience of your players. Just like I said, the Geelong forward line versus the North Melbourne back line, and just see the void that sits there in terms of just experience and exposure. And I don't want to make excuses for our players. It's where we're at, though. And we're giving these young players some exposure and some opportunity. And but in our back end in particular, we're going to be left very, very vulnerable down there against a really formidable forward line for the Cats if we couldn't control the middle of the ground as well as we'd like. And as I said, Geelong were just too good in that space.
Is the talent there overall, Clarko, or do you feel you need to go out and get some more established bodies this summer?
Well, we need to keep... I marvel at all the sides in the competition, even the ones at the top that say, we're still in the game of getting our list better. I'm not sure some of these sides that are sitting in the top four really need to get their list any better, but we certainly do. We know that's the game. It's harder to get your talent nowadays, but we just got to keep searching for it. And but we feel like with the group of young players that we've got, it doesn't help, obviously, with results like tonight. But as I said, the exposure that some of these guys get, Will Dawson's playing something like his 8th game of AFL footy, and he's at different stages playing on Jeremy Cameron, and Patrick Dangerfield, and these sorts of guys once you roll around in your defence. And it's hard to fathom just how much and how valuable that experience is, irrespective of the result, and irrespective of whether he wins contests or loses contests. But we just know that the only way forward for us is to continue to give these young players some exposure, and we feel like if they can come through together, then we'll improve as a footy club.
Is it regrettable you don't have your first round draft pick this year when you probably will finish bottom 2 or 3 again, and you're wanting to add to the group?
We just keep working our way through that. We rated young Whitlock really, really highly, and so the list management team made a call on that last year. It's just horses for courses. There's not a club in the competition that get it right all the time, and there's some that like everyone would applaud our list management team for getting Nick Larkey, right? He picked 75. So where did he come from? You know what I mean? Luke Bruce was a rookie. He's played over 300 games and kicked 600 goals. Pretty special effort. You get some right, but there's always hits and misses. But that's the game that you play. You roll the dice, and we'll see where that rolls with us.
You said that you know where you're at. So does this year so far met expectations of what you would have said at the start of the year?
Well, we know internally. I mean, everyone will look at win-loss and all that sort of stuff, and they're making progress. And even if it is just win-loss, we have made some progress. But we look at we've had 3 performances that were well below our best, which is the Carlton game round 6 here, the Hawthorn game about a month ago down in Tassie, and tonight. But outside of that, we've been much more competitive than what we were last year, and winning more quarters and being in more games at 3/4 time than we had last year. So there's some of the measurements that we use, the progress of some of our players like Sherry and Curtis at different stages this year have been spoken up about being all Australian players, and So we continue to look at small wins within the walls of our footy club, knowing full well that we need to get better. But I don't think there's anyone in here that predicted North were going to be making finals or anything like that. So we know it's a long, hard road for us, but we're up for the challenge, and just know that some of these experiences that we go through will just harden us up in the long journey that we're on.
Maybe it's detrimental, those experiences, if they're repeat losses?
Well, when they're, I think sometimes they can certainly harden you up, but sometimes there's extenuating circumstances too. And as I said, our preference was that we wouldn't have to throw so many of those young kids to the wolves in our back end, for instance. But when Core and Archer and McDonald and these type of players are unavailable for you, then it's leaving you pretty skinny in your back end.
Expect to have Marky back next week.
Hoping so, yeah. He was he trained pretty well during the week, but just want to make sure we get that right. PCL injuries can be nasty ones. I don't know how Tom Stewart's doing it, if that's what he's got, but we just wanted to make sure that he's totally right, and hopefully we'll be right for next week. No worries. Good on you guys. Thank you.